Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Radio Demon, by Camdog2. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's start the show. Wow, Kakin, your quirk really is awesome, I hope mine is that cool. 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya told his friend one day in preschool. The one in question, Katsuki Bakugo, just smirked. Please Deku, like anything you could get would be better than this, he said as he looked down at his hands, where mini explosions were going off. The smirk however went away when he looked back up and saw Izuku with his head down and a small frown on his face. Most would think this is because he has yet to get his quirk, but Katsuki knew exactly what was bothering his friend. Have you heard anything from your dad yet? Katsuki asked quietly while Izuku just shook his head. A little over a week ago Izuku's father Hisashi Midoriya left in the middle of the night. His mother Inko had met him at the door and unknown to her Izuku had woken up, followed and hid behind the corner. Hisashi however seemed to notice him and told him to come out. Izuku could still remember the words his father said to them, the promise he had made to them. Don't worry, it'll only be for a little while. I just have some loose ends to tie up. I promise I'll be home soon. Izuku was freaking out. He didn't understand why his dad was leaving. Was it his fault? Was it because he didn't have a quirk? Izuku's thought process was cut off when he left his father's hand on top of his head. Do not worry Izuku, your quirk will develop, I know it will. And even if it doesn't hold your head up high like your uncle did when he discovered he was quirkless. Can you do that for me, son? Izuku with tears in his eyes nodded as Hisashi seeing this gained a small and sad smile as he wrapped Izuku and a crying Inko into a hug and spoke one last time. I'll be back in no time. I promise. Izuku sighed sadly as he shook his head. He can't keep being sad, his dad promised he would be back soon, so Izuku would wait. Katsuki seeing his friend come out of his funk grinned. Come on Deku, let's go get some All Might comics before these losers get them all. He told his friend who nodded happily as the two quickly crossed the room. Crash! Everyone screamed as a bus stop bench flew through the window and crashed into the walls. The children screamed as the teachers tried to calm them down. However, before they could, several men carrying semi-automatic rushed into the building. Sorry about the intrusion, but we need this building as well as your help in a little job we're doing, a man said as he walked through the window. One of the teachers spoke up, doing his best to keep his voice steady and calm. Excuse me, but who are you and what do you mean help with a job? He asked with the man just chuckling. Call me Muscular. The now identified Muscular said as his grin grew. As for the job, a convoy of armored trucks carrying billions worth of yen will be passing through the city soon. Naturally it'll be guarded by several pro heroes, so attacking head-on won't work, but if someone were to take a preschool class captive and demand the money in exchange for their safe return, I think they'll be more willing to listen. Muscular finished explaining his plan. The teachers and students meanwhile were terrified at what was happening. Though the teachers tried to put on a brave face and calm the students down, knowing that as long as they cooperate they should get through this. Why you won't win? A voice said, causing everyone to freeze before slowly they all turned to see Bakugo shaking in fear but glaring at Muscular even as Izuku tried to stop him. Is that so? Muscular asked amused as he walked over to Katsuki. As this was going on, one of Muscular's henchmen were sniffing around, an action noticed by his teammates. And just what the hell are you doing? One of them asked. You don't smell that? The one sniffing around asked with the other shaking his head. No, what do you smell? He asked, though the answer he got made him extremely nervous. Gas. Back with Muscular, he had just reached Katsuki and Izuku, who was now shaking in fear. Alright little brat, now explain to me, why won't I win? He asked, grinning down at Bakugo maliciously, causing the boy to take a step back. Well, I'm waiting. Bakugo looked up and glared the best he could. Because real heroes always win, just like I will when I become a hero. Katsuki said defiantly, only for him and Izuku to get grabbed by their necks and lifted into the air where they struggled to breathe. Heroes always win. Muscular asked mockingly. Well, let's see you win, little wannabe. By this point the smell of gas had covered most of the room and the adults were getting more and more worried about something setting off a massive explosion. Suddenly the teacher's eyes widened in fear as they saw Katsuki getting more and more desperate and was about to lose his temper. Katsuki and Izuku were getting desperate by this point, both kicking and punching the villain to no avail. I'm getting bored here, kid. Muscular said before an idea came him, causing him grin cruelly. Actually, kid, I've got a fun little idea to pass the time until the negotiators get here. I'll continue to count from 1 to each time I get to 3 I'll kill one of the hostages. Starting with this kid right here. Muscular said as he lifted Izuku, whose eyes widened in fear while everyone else cried out. Hey boss, what about the plan? The one the henchman asked. Don't worry about it. I'll only kill 5 or 6 kids. We'll still have plenty left to ransom. Muscular explained, getting a nod from the man. Now then, shall we start, brat? The villain asked Katsuki, who was still thrashing wildly and punching whatever he could hit. Ready? Muscular asked, ignoring all the punches and kicks the kids were giving him. 1. Katsuki was hitting him with everything he got, but it proved to do nothing. 2. If you've got a quirk, kid, now's the time to use it. Muscular shouted, causing Katsuki's eyes to widen. How the hell could he have forgotten about his quirk? The teachers hearing this shouted for Katsuki not to do it, the gas completely filling the room now. But it was too late. Boom! The explosion could be seen, heard and felt for miles around as heroes, police and paramedics rushed to the scene. Back at the preschool, it had been reduced to crater. Katsuki, however, just stood there motionless, ignoring everything around him as he stared at the charred, motionless body of his best friend. I did this. He thought as his legs gave out. I killed them. Bakugo thought as he could no longer contain it and screamed at the top of lungs. Oi, pipe down, you little SHT, a voice growled as Katsuki stared in terror as Muscular emerged from the rubble, his muscle fibers tearing out of his skin as his quirk activated to shield him from the blast. Looking around, the villain whistled as he saw the carnage. DMN, kid, you really did a number on this place. Not bad. Muscular said, walking forward and thoughtlessly step on Izuku's body as Katsuki backed away in horror. Unfortunately, my plan is pretty much shot at this point. So there's no point in keeping you alive. Don't, though, from the sound of it I don't have much time, so I'll make it quick. Muscular revealed before he charged. Throughout this, neither one of noticed a crimson-red aura surround Izuku's body and quickly heal his wounds before they boys slowly started to move. Time to die. Muscular roared as he launched a punch at Bakugo, who braced himself the best he could. What neither expected was for the punch to be stopped by a tiny finger. Both of them stared at the sheer impossibility of what they were seeing, but for different reasons. For Muscular it was because his punch was stopped like it was nothing by a kid no less. Bakugo was stunned though by the fact that the one who stopped it was the friend who he was certain just died a few minutes ago. Deku? He asked nervously before Izuku turned around and Bakugo flinched back at seeing his friend's face. Izuku's pupil and iris were a deep red, his skin has turned gray and his teeth had turned sharp and yellow. Look, Kaken, I finally got my quirk. Izuku said happily as he danced around while completely ignoring the death and destruction around him, unnerving Katsuki and even Muscular. Before anything else could be said, something impacted into Muscular, slamming him into the ground. It turned out to be Gang Orca, a relatively new hero. Muscular snarled, but before he could do anything, Orca launched hypersonic waves at the villain, blasting him away into unconsciousness. Katsuki by this point had noticed that more heroes, police and other emergency responders had arrived and were quick to rush over to him and Izuku. Seeing that it was over, that he and Deku, who still had that disturbing smile, talk happily to paramedics, were still alive, and that Muscular was being restrained by the heroes, finally felt himself call unconscious. Line break. There was an air of despair in the hospital waiting room as parents of the recently deceased children sat in silence as they mourned for their lost, save for the occasion soft sob. Off to the side, Izuku Midoriya and Mitsuki Bakugo sat in silence as they waited to hear news about their sons. Masaru, Mitsuki's husband and Katsuki father, was at work when this happened, and was on his way there as fast as he could. How could this happen? Am I cursed to have everyone I love leave or get hurt? Izuku questioned quietly so only Mitsuki could hear, who wrapped her arms around the green-haired woman. Hey now, don't think like that. They're alive and that's what matters. Right now all we can do is be there for them and help them through it. Mitsuki said, and Izuku nodded grateful. Ms. Midoriya. A doctor called as he approached, getting her attention. We've finished our examination of your son. You can see him now if you wish. The doctor revealed, causing Izuku to jump up, and after a quick look at Mitsuki, who waved her off, was quick to follow the doctor. Your son's very lucky, ma'am. If it weren't for his quirk he wouldn't still be here. The doctor revealed, causing Inko's eyes to widen. She had seen her son and saw the difference in his appearance, so his quirk obviously activated, and while normally she would have been ecstatic, though given the circumstances she had been filled with worry. What exactly is his quirk? Inko asked, and here the doctor looked a little uncomfortable. It's a mutant-type quirk, and I don't really know how to say this, but it seemed to have turned into a form of undead. He revealed, causing Inko to freeze. Undead. Doctor, what are you saying? It sounds like you think Izuku is a zombie from the sound of it. Inko shouted as the doctor tried to calm her down. It's nothing like that, but we have run some tests and discovered some rather unsettling things. For one, his heart's no longer beating, it's still there, it's just not beating. He also no longer has the need to breathe. In fact, I think the only time he's breathed is when we asked him to. His senses also seem to have been heightened astronomically, and his physical abilities even more do. The doctor revealed, and Inko's eyes widened the more she heard. There is one more thing we discovered. Your son seems to be able to access a near limitless supply that, well, I can only describe as magic. The doctor revealed as they had reached the room Izuku was in. Inko was just about to go in, but the doctor stopped her. A word of warning. Are you aware that one's quirk could affect their mentality and thinking? He questioned, with Inko nodding nervously, not liking where this was going. Well, that seems to be the case for your son. I think it would be better if you saw for yourself. With that he opened the door that Inko practically ran through. Her worries, however, were put to rest in an instant, however, when she saw her son with his new features talking happily with the nurses. Izuku. She shouted as she was quick to engulf her son in a hug. Are you all right, baby? I was so worried when I heard about the incident. She continued to cry. Don't worry, Mom, everything's fine, I'm alive and I've got my quirk. So there's nothing to be worried about. Izuku said cheerfully, not noticing the shocked look on his mother's face as she slowly pulled away. Izuku, how could you say something like this? All your classmates and teachers are dead, do you not understand that? She asked, a little frantic. All Izuku could do was offer a little smile. I know I should feel something about it, but I just don't. Izuku finished with a little shrug. Inko could only stare in horror while the doctor sighed. This is what I was talking about, Ms. Midoriya. For the most part he's mentally stable, but he seems to have lost the ability to feel sadness or despair for himself or others. I believe he can still feel things like rage, hate or boredom, but that's about it. It's as if nothing bothers him anymore. The doctor explained, with Inko remaining silent. So what should I do, what can I do? She asked. Simple, you keep raising him the way you have been. Like I said, he's pretty much the same, even if he's a little unstable. The doctor explained. Yeah, Mom. Just because I can't feel certain things anymore doesn't mean I'm not me. Besides, now that I have a quirk I can be a hero. Izuku cheered with a smile. Inko looked at her son for a second before a small smile appeared on her face as she kneeled down and hugged her son. He was right, of course Izuku was still Izuku, and even though his new personality may take some getting used to, she would love and support him no matter what. Line break, Katsuki groaned as he sat up in his bed, an annoying beeping could be heard that turned out to be a heart monitor. He sat up with another groan. Where am I? How did I get it there? He questioned himself as a nurse opened the door to check on him and saw he was awake. Oh, good you're awake, I'll go get the doctor and your family, she said after checking on him, to which he nodded. A few minutes later Katsuki's parents and doctor entered and his parents quickly rushed to his side. Katsuki, are you all ready? Anything feel broken? Mitsuki asked, frantically checking her son over. Masaru meanwhile did his best to remain calm as he addressed his son. How are you, son? Do you remember what happened? At this Katsuki though hard trying to remember until it all came flying back to him. The villains, the explosion, Deku, all of it really happened. So it's true, all of that really happened. I actually killed. No, you are in no way being held accountable for what happened. A new voice said as a man entered the room. Hello, I'm Naomasa Tsukachi, a detective from the police force, and I just need you to answer some questions the best you can. Tsukachi requested, and Bakugo nodded and proceeded to answer the questions the best he could as the doctor looked him over and found nothing but a couple scrapes and bruises. Finally, after about 10 minutes he was done and Tsukachi got up satisfied. Thank you very much for your cooperation, and I have to say you handled this very well, Tsukachi complimented, causing Katsuki to grin. Of course, I'm going to be the #1 hero someday, he boasted as he created some explosions. Or at least tried to. Try as he might, no explosions came, and it only took the adults a few seconds to see the look of panic and confusion on his face. Katsuki, what's wrong? Mitsuki asked, concerned as her son looked more and more confused. My quirk, it's not activating, he revealed, causing the adults to go wide-eyed before the doctor immediately went to look him over again. Young man, I don't see how that's possible. By all accounts you're perfectly fine, if a little banged up. You should be perfectly able to use your quirk, the doctor said, completely lost. Well, obviously I can't, Katsuki snapped before trying with all his might to create an explosion, only to scream as visions of preschool incident flooded his mind, causing him to fall back in the bed. His parents were by his side in an instant in an attempt to calm him down. Finally, after a few minutes and deep breaths, Katsuki was back in control. Okay, what the hell was that? Just what the hell is wrong with my son? Mitsuki demanded, grabbing the doctor by the shirt and shaking him rapidly while the poor man was unable to answer. I think I might know, Tsukachi, who was still there, said quietly, and once he saw he had their full attention he continued. We see this sometimes. When something like this occurs and a civilian's quirk causes harm, depending on the scale of the damage, one could actually subconsciously become fearful of their quirk. That fear could prevent them from activating their quirk, he revealed, shocking those present and terrifying Katsuki at the implications. In essence, they become quirkless, he finished with closed eyes and a tone of regret that he had to tell a young child this. Bakugo meanwhile felt his entire world shatter. Bad enough to be scared on his own power, but to the point where he can't even use it. Is there anything I can to fix this? He pleased. Tsukachi nodded instantly. Of course there are. There are physiological who specialize helping people who are going through the same thing, and I know they can help you, the detective reassured. But listen, even if it doesn't work and you can't use your quirk, don't give up on being a hero. There are plenty of quirkless heroes out there. I mean, just look America. He chuckled. Do you understand? The detective asked the boy, who after a moment nodded, causing the adults to smile. That's great to hear, but I think it's time we let you get some rest. You'll be released tomorrow, but we want to keep you overnight just to be sure, the doctor informed as he and Tsukachi headed for the exit, soon followed by the Bakugos after saying goodbye to their son. After they left, Katsuki just sat there thinking over that he had been through, and how close he and Izuku came to dying like their classmates. He started shaking thinking about it before he stopped himself. That's when his thoughts drifted to his quirk and how he might never be able to use it again. And if that's the case, could he ever be hero, even after what the detective told him? No, I can't think like that. Katsuki thought, shaking his head. It didn't matter what he went trough, what he'll face, or even if he never uses his quirk again. Katsuki Bakugo was going to be a hero, no matter what. Setting the stage, a little heads up, this chapter will jump around a lot at first. Izuku Midoriya hummed as she prepared breakfast. It had been 10 years since that horrible day when she thought she had lost her son, only for his quirk to activate and turn him into who he was today. Izuku, who had taken what the doctor told her to heart and did her best to raise her son, and she was proud to say she succeeded. That's not to say there haven't been issues. Just as the doctor warned, Izuku seemed to have lost all feelings related to sadness, despair, regret, or any feeling other than joy and other positive emotions. In fact, there was only one time when Izuku saw her son get angry. He was around 5 years old, and one night the pair had been surrounded by 2 purse snatchers, one with a quirk that lets him turn his fingers into small swords while the other was holding a gun. Izuku nervously tried to hand over the money while keeping an eye on Izuku, who was still smiling, a fact that unnerved the snatchers. Izuku could see her son's eye and finger start to twitch. Trying to end this as quickly as possible, the mother quickly got out all the yen she had and handed it over. Believing that would be the end of it, and it would have been had it not been for one little mistake. It was completely accidental, the thieves would later tell the police. They already had the money, so there was no reason for them to keep harassing the mother and son, but as the thieves started to flee, the one with a finger blade quirk tripped, accidentally giving Izuku a small scratch on her cheek. For a moment everyone stood still, not knowing what to do. However, soon a small giggling could be heard that soon grew into a maniacal laugh as the 3 adults slowly turned to the terrifying sight of 5-year-old laughing insanely while his red eyes burned with hatred. That wasn't what scared the 3, however, for it was the fact the world seemed to distort around him as this was happening. All 3 were too scared to move, even Izuku. None of them have ever been as scared as they were at that moment. That's when Izuku made his move. When the police arrived after getting reports of disturbances, they came upon a disturbing scene of a young woman trying to calm her son down while off in a corner were 2 men. The one who finger blades had both his hands, arms, and all of his finger broken, as well as 2 black eyes, a broken nose, and a busted jaw. The other man just sat there, and while he appeared uninjured, he had a look of pure terror on his face. I'm just happy the police was so understanding. Izuku thought to herself as she let out a small sigh. After being taken down to the station and explaining what happened, the police decided to declare it as self-defense. However, the officer in charge did explain that Izuku would have to go to a youth quirk training center, facilities designed to help children understand and control their quirk better, as well as any side effect that may come as a result of their quirk. Izuku was all too happy to agree, as she was planning on sending Izuku to one anyway. And it turned out it was one of the best decisions of my life. Izuku thought happily as her eyes drifted to a picture as she adopted a sad smile on her face. Oh Hisashi, what happened to you? She thought sadly. After Hisashi left that night, he pretty much went dark on Izuku and Izuku, with only a few messages here and there. That was until about 5 years ago, when he actually called Izuku informing her that his business was nearly done and that he should be home soon. This left Izuku in tears. Finally, after years, Hisashi, the man she loved, was coming home. Izuku was also happy that Izuku was getting his father back. She knew her son had basically written his father off, and felt nothing for the man, but hopefully that would change when he got back, so with high spirits and a spring in her step she went about her day, waiting for the day their family would be complete. Only for it to never come. Days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months, and through all this not one word from the man, leaving Izuku to wonder what happened. Still, Izuku was very happy with her life. She had a nice apartment, good friends, and a wonderful son. I couldn't ask for more. She thought as the sound of a door opening reached her ears, followed by the sound of tapping. Good morning, Izuku. She greeted her son. The boy in question grinned at his mother. Good morning, mother. How are you doing on this very fine day? The boy questioned happily, his voice sounding like it was being broadcast from an old-timey radio, as he quickly walked over to Izuku, his tapped shoes tapping with each step. A small buzzing followed him as he did so. Why Izuku chose to talk like that and wear tap shoes, Izuku didn't know, but she just chalked it up to his unique personality. As he approached he gave her a hug good morning which she happily returned before looking at her son. Even after all these years she had stayed tall and slim, so she figured she'd be taller than her son for a good while. This turned out not to be the case as he seemed to take after his father and quickly grew to a height of 6 feet, about a head taller than her. The two were about to sit down for breakfast when there was a knock on the door. Izuku immediately headed for the door, his grin somehow growing ever wider as he reached the door and opened it. "Cheery, Angel. You're actually early today." Izuku greeted the two at the door. This was Angel Dust and Cherry Biome, two of Izuku's closest friends. Cheery grinned as she pointed at Angel. "What can I say, I finally found a way to get this slacker out of bed," she said before walking in while Angel Dust scoffed as he leaned into Izuku. "Yeah, by pouring toilet water all over me," she said next time it wouldn't be clean. Angel said his face grimacing in disgust at the thought while Izuku chuckled as they headed over to the table where Inko was putting down plates. "So kids, do you have any plans after school today?" Inko asked while Cherry grinned. "Same thing as always, me and Izuku are heading over to the Quirk training center to prepare for UA. Angel's joining us cause his life's nothing without us," she explained with Angel tisked. "Please, the only reason I'm joining you nerds is because my acting coach is out of town." Angel revealed annoyed he had to take time off from his training to be a movie star. After that the four ate while making idly chit-chat before it was time for the kids to go, so after saying their goodbyes Izuku, Cheery and Angel left for school. Line break. Katsuki Bakugo stares off into space-board as he waited for class to begin. Every once in a while he would stare at his palm before grunting in annoyance and looking away. It had been 10 years since the worst day in his life, and after nightmares, panic attacks, and lots of therapy could truly say he had recovered, though he did have the occasional nightmare. However, even after all this time Bakugo still couldn't access his quirk. No one could explain why. Doctors and physiologists all agree he should have full use of his quirk. Katsuki sighed as he shook his head. It really didn't matter if he got his quirk back at this point, he'd had absolutely no control over it, so it'd basically be useless. Katsuki suddenly scowled as he clenched his fist. It doesn't matter if he had a quirk or not, he'd been training in unarmed combat and has sparred with Izuku for years. "I will be a hero, and it all starts with getting into UA's Class B," the ashen-haired teen thought. There were 2 hero classes at UA High. Class A and Class B. Class A was the advanced class for those whose quirks, skills, and mind were somewhat ready for their careers as heroes. They focus on pushing past every limit they had so they could become the great heroes of tomorrow. Class B was the reserve course. It was for those who had rather weak quirks, quirkless, or those who had little training or were not mentally ready for the advanced course. Class B also wasn't able to go for their provincial licenses until their second year. There were also 2 different tests for the classes, as students can either choose to apply to either Class A or Class B. Thinking about UA again, Bakugo. Hearing this, Bakugo looked up to see who had questioned him. Bakugo simply sighed as he turned to the window. "Yeah," he said simply to his other friends. Honestly though, he was beyond happy to still have them around, both having been sick the day the attack occurred. The two, seeing this, looked at each concerned for a moment before nodding at each other, determined before turning back to their friend. "So Bakugo, you want to go to the arcade after school?" The long with long bangs asked hopefully. "Yeah, you've been training so hard recently, we haven't been able to hang out recently," the scruffy-haired one asked. Katsuki sighed hearing this. He knew they were worried about him and that did annoy him a little, but they were right, he had been pushing himself too hard recently, so with a sigh he nodded, causing his friends to cheer. The day went on as usual after that, and it was as he was packing up that Deku walked over. "So Katsuki, what's this I hear about you finally growing a heart and hanging out with your friends?" he asked, the DMN smile he wore getting bigger as a vein throbbed on his forehead, which only got worse when he saw their 2 groups of friends snickering behind him. "Shut the hell up, Deku. That's none of your DMN business," he shouted at this best friend before storming out quickly, followed by his still laughing friends. Izuku, seeing this, chuckled quietly. "Well, that was entertaining," he commented before turning to his friends. So you both ready to go? He asked, only for Angel to shake his head no. We've got to stop by my place first. I forgot a script for a play I'm auditioning for. If I'm not going to be able to meet my acting coach, I'll at least work on my lines. Honestly, Angie, you'd lose your head if it wasn't attached to your head. Cherry smirked. This better not take too long, Angel, we've got training to do. You'd love me anyway. He commented as the three left the school towards Angel's home. And don't worry, you'll get your training in. It'll take 5 minutes tops. Line break. 5 minutes, my butt. That took an hour, and that was with all three of us looking. Cherry scowled at her friend, who scoffed. Well, excuse me for wanting to keep my script safe. At this, Cherry smirked as she crossed her arms. And you think the shower is safe? She asked, her eye narrowing. However, before anything else could be said, screams of panic attracted the attention of the trio and everyone else in the area, who all rushed off to the source of the sound. So what do you think is happening? Bank robbery, shootout, two giants fighting? Cherry questioned with a wild smile while excitement filled her voice and eye. I don't know, but we'll find out in a minute. Angel said with a smirk as Izuku's smile just grew in excitement as all three ran with the crowd. None of them noticed a skeletal man with wild blonde hair and blue eyes slightly behind them. It was then that the trio arrived, and upon seeing the scene, Angel and Cherry gained shocked and terrified looks while Izuku's smile grew strained. His eyes started to twitch and the hum of radio static could be heard as the trio stared at the scene in front of them. Katsuki's friends had been captured by a sludge villain, and no matter what the pros tried, they couldn't get them free, their quirks being bad matchups against the villains. Plus they couldn't go all out with the risk of harming the hostages. Those idiots. Cherry scowled as she turned to her friends. We have to do something. She told them, with both nodding, though Angel did it reluctantly. However, before they could move, a cry of "DM it" was heard as the crowd gasped as they saw Bakugo racing forward, ignoring the hero's yells to get back as he dodging the villain's attacks before reaching them and trying to pull his friends loose. Get away, Katsuki. You can't beat this thing. Scruffy screamed, trying to keep his friend from getting hurt. Yeah man, you've got Dream to think about. Bang said. Shut the hell up, you idiots. If I can't save my friends, then I have no right to be a hero. He declared, shocking the crowd and the blonde man from earlier. Well then, if you want to be a hero, then you'll have no problem dying like one. The slime villain spoke for the first time as he went to strike the ashen-haired boy. However, before the attack could land, a force slammed into the slime villain, knocking him off the two students. Katsuki, seeing this, quickly grabbed his friends and ran as the pros quickly ran in, trying to contain the villain. No one noticed Izuku put his hand down, a satisfied smirk on his face. Hando number show, he thought as the trio looked at the scene as people tried to figure out what happened and who caused it. However, Izuku's attention was drawn to the blonde man who was staring at Izuku, frozen, clearly figuring out he was the one who did it. Seeing this, Izuku just chuckled while putting his finger to his lips in a sechichenji manner, to which the man was able to compose himself and nod. Satisfied and seeing everything seemed to be taken care of, the trio went on their way to the training center, hopefully without any more drama. Line break. Toshinori Yagi aka All Might was having a hell of a day. It started out slow with almost no crime happening, and what little there was being taken care of without him being needed. That was until the slime villain. What he though would be chasing a simple purse snatcher, actually ending up as a 3-hour chase, with him ending up in a sewer until he finally caught the guy. It was when he had climbed out the trouble begun, because right as he started hearing voices approaching, steam starting coming off his body indicating his time was up. So in his panic at getting away, he didn't notice the bottle he used to contain the villain slip from his pocket until he heard the scream start. With no choice, Toshinori ran with the rest of the crowd in his skinny form, and upon seeing the two boys captured by the villain, he let go. He was filled with regret and self-loathing. And then it happened. A boy that was wearing the same school uniform as the other two ran towards them and attempted to rescue his friends. The words the young man said rang in his ears, and once he saw the determination and drive the student showed, Toshinori knew he found the one he was looking for, and was ready to push his body in order to save them consequences be met. However, just before All Might could move, something slammed into the villain, knocking him back and off the kids, who quickly ran to safety. As the pros went to capture the villain and the crowd was left to wonder what had happened, Toshinori turned to the person next to him, easily figuring out it was them who fired the shot. Now he knew vigilantism was illegal, but he couldn't help himself. Anyone who wanted to help others had the potential to be a hero. However, when he saw a 6-foot-tall figure with red eyes, sharp, yellow teeth and gray skin, he froze. Toshinori Yagi was in no way a racist. True, he was a little judgmental when it comes to the quirkless becoming heroes, but he didn't look down on them or mutant types in any way. However, when the young man looked at him, something in All Might froze, as it felt like someone had stuck a knife made of ice into his old wound, causing him to freeze. When the boy turned to him, Toshinori could only stare, and when the boy chuckled and made the shushing, he could only nod as he continued to stare at the kid. It was only after he and his friends left that he was able to breathe again. He couldn't explain it, but something about that young man just unnerved All Might in a way that shouldn't be possible. In fact, he hadn't felt that way since his fight with Toshinori. Shook his head, banishing the thought. What was he thinking? Comparing someone who he just saw help someone to that monster, his mind really was starting to slip in his old age. On that note, Toshinori thought with a final shake of his head as his eyes moved back to Bakugo. It's time I had a little talk with that young man, and hopefully an offer. And with that, Toshinori moved toward the boy. Only to see he and everyone else had left. As soon as I find him. Line break. In the blink of an eye, 10 months had passed and Izuku, Cherry, and Bakugo found themselves standing in front of the legendary UA High. Well, my friends, this is it. Izuku said, as cheerful as ever. He was wearing a black sleeveless t-shirt, black and white cannon pants and his tap shoes. Hell yeah, it is. It's time to show what we can do. Cherry grinned. She was wearing a red TV shirt with a black jacket, ripped jeans and sports shoes. She then turned to Bakugo. What about you, Katsuki? You still going for the B course even after all this secret training you've been doing these last 10 months? She snickered toward the boy, who only nodded. Bakugo was wearing a dark blue muscle shirt, green army pants and combat boots. Yeah, it's the best I can do for now. Even after training with All Might for 10 months, bulking up and inheriting the Quirk one for all that very morning, he still felt it was best to go to the B course, as it was literally made to help students understand their quirks. Besides, it was hard enough to explain how he got private training, there was no way he was ready to explain how he got another quirk. Well, best of my luck to you, my friend. Izuku told Bakugo, how nodded before heading to one of the gyms where the B-class test was being held. Well then, my dear, shall we go? Izuku asked Cherry, who gained a BLD thirsty smile and nodded. With that, the two hero course hopefuls headed inside, ready to face any challenge that got in their way. Line break. Welcome all hero hopefuls. As I am sure all of you know, I am the voice hero Present Mike, and I'll be the overseer of today's test. Can I get a yeah? Present Mike explained before turning to the crowd and placing his hand to his ear as he waited to hear a response. Present Mike was a tall, slim man with long blonde hair which he wears spiked upwards in a huge tuft behind his head, with a small mustache and square eyes behind sunglasses. When his question was met with silence, his smile faltered a little until it returned full force when he heard clapping and cheering and looked to see Izuku and Cherry clapping and cheering respectively, ignoring the weird looks from other applicants and the disapproving look from a blue-haired teen with glasses. Mike grinned. Finally, some applicants with good taste. That's what I am talking about. Now then, on to the test. At this, the screen showed 4 shadowed enemies. Now then, for this test you'll be put into different zones and will face enemies worth 1, 2, and 3 points respectively. Feel free to use your quirks as much as possible, but friendly fire is strictly prohibited. Excuse me, sir. The blue-haired boy from earlier suddenly shot up. Yes, and you are? Present Mike asked. Tenya Ida, sir, and I must lodge a complaint. The now named Ida replied as he pointed at the information sheet. You've mentioned 3 enemies, yet there are 4 enemies on this sheet. How could you make such a mistake? He said before suddenly turning and pointing at Chiri. And you get your feet of the table. That seat was used by our predecessors. How dare you dirty it? He said while making weird movements with his hands while Cherry, who did have her feet on the tables, just smirked, shrugged and lifted her feet an inch off the table, getting a twitch from the boy. It's at this time Izuku spoke up, mostly because he could see a fight coming and tried to avoid it. You know, if you waited a bit they probably would have covered that. Looks like we know the first thing you'll have to work on here. Let it be known Izuku Midoriya is bad at avoiding fights. Ida looked close to exploding, something present Mike luckily noticed. What a great transaction to our next section. Our red-eyed friend there is correct, the fourth robot is worth 0 points, so there's no point in fighting it. Think of it as a giant road block. Does that answer your question? He asked Ida, who nodded and sat down, though he did send an occasional glare at Chiri and Izuku. Well, that's it, loyal listeners. Does anyone have any questions? Mike asked, and when no one said anything he grinned. Well then, there's nothing left to be said. Off to your arenas, applicants, and remember, go beyond. Plus Ultra. Line break. Izuku was standing by himself waiting for the test to begin as Cherry was assigned to a different zone. He was mentally going over how he was going to do this when he felt a hand on his shoulder, and when he turned he saw Ida staring at him with a disapproving look on his face. Yes. Izuku asked as others noticed this and turned to watch. Can I help you with something? Ida just remained silent for a second before speaking. You don't belong here. At this several people gasped at the statement while Izuku just raised an eyebrow as Ida continued. I'm sorry, but it's true. From what I've seen, you're not hero material. You're standing here with a carefree smile on your face, staring off into smile. Not to mention you helped that girl distribute the ceremony with that stupid voice changing of yours. And to top it off, you're wearing tap shoes to a physical test. So taking all this into account, I can only state the truth. Ida finished with the applicants listening in start to talk. Well, when he says it like that. He is wearing tap shoes. I guess that's one less guy to worry about. Ida, hearing this, spread his arms wide. See, our fellow applicants agree. He said, walking over and placing his hand on Izuku's shoulder. I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just stating facts, and the fact is you don't belong here. So do everyone a favor and leave now. He said as he and the applicants turned and walked away. If they had, they would have seen the monstrous smirk appear on Izuku and his shadow's face. Alright, Propel. Ready. Begin. Present Mick's voice rang out, getting surprised looks from the hero hopefuls. What, you were expecting a countdown? You got to be ready to move at a moment's notice. Like Red OVDR Thief. Mike said as the applicants looked to see Izuku calmly walk into the zone. However, before they could move, Izuku stopped and turned to them. So sorry everyone, but this just became a one-man show. He informed ominously as he snapped his fingers. Before anyone could react, a giant wall of crystals rose up surrounding the entire arena and cutting off the other applicants from the area. As screams as of surprise and panic came from the applicants, Izuku chuckled as he walked further into the arena when various 2- and 3-pointers appeared and begun to fire RBB bullets at the boy, only to bounce off an invisible barrier in front of him. Izuku meanwhile grinned as magic formed around his hands and morphed them into elongated claws, stretching over 80 centimeters long. This was Izuku's aspect of the Devil Razor Sharp Claw. With a grin, Izuku suddenly vanished, reappearing in the middle of the enemy robots and sliced them to ribbons before they could even move. Now then, Izuku said as he saw more enemies approach and his smile turned feral. Let's have some fun. With that, Izuku lunged straight at bots, ready for whatever they could throw at him. Line break. In the monitoring room, roars of laughter could be heard as the teachers stared unblinking at the screen as they watched Izuku destroy robot after robot. Well, that's one way to do it. Snipe said as uncertainty as he scratched the back of his head. But I'm not sure it's actually allowed. He continued, only to be answered by the source of the laughter. Oh, it definitely is. Principal Nizu managed to get out between his laughter as he watched the greatest entrance exam he'd ever seen. You've got quite an interesting student coming your way, Shota. He informed a tired-looking man who grunted in reply as he watched the screen. This was Shota Aizawa, otherwise known as the pro-hero Eraserhead and the homeroom teacher of Class 1A. Still though, what about the other applicants, the ones outside the barrier? Cementos asked as they switched to a camera outside the barrier showing a few of the applicants such as Tenya Ida and a blonde boy firing a laser from his belly button were attacking the wall, while most were just sitting down depressed or cursing Izuku out for cheating them. Shota chose this moment to speak up. I say we fail them here and now. They're clearly not ready to be heroes. At seeing all but the principal and an other look at him, he sighed. Think logically here. They all underestimated him and he's showing them how wrong they were to do so. Imagine if they did so in the field when actual lives were on the line. The protest died in the teachers' throats as they realized he was right. I'm not saying what he did wasn't childish or pity, in fact he's probably aware that he just ended the dreams of all those kids and doesn't care. However, we were already aware of his lack of empathy from his medical reports. Aizawa said, having brought up Izuku's file. Not to mention the way he did was completely harmless and ensured he wouldn't break the friendly fire rule. And quite frankly, I'd rather have someone like him in my class than those who underestimate people and then whine about it like a spoiled child. He finished as they looked at the screen and saw now even those who were attacking the crystals sitting around depressed or demanding Midoriya be disqualified. The teachers were unsure how to proceed until someone had been silent till now spoke up. I agree with Aizawa. With that, everyone turned and looked at the newest teacher at UA, Toshinori Yagi, aka All Might. Yes, what young Midoriya did was underhanded, but he's getting the job done, and at the end of the day that's what matters. Even, here All Might sighed tiredly and sadly at what he was about to say. Even if results in the creation of another evil hero. He finished as everyone looked down sadly. Evil heroes were considered the monsters of the hero world. For the most part they were normal heroes and acted and as such, however these were the heroes that were called on for the most extreme cases when extreme measures were needed. That's where the evil heroes came in. They were the ones to handle these missions, and they always did with honest-to-God smiles on their faces as they relish every moment of it. They also contacts in and had multiple dealings with Underworld and the villains that work within it. Often teaming up with small groups to deal with bigger threats. Principal Nizu sighed. While it is true that I've seen several traits that an evil heroes have often shown in Midoriya in this short time, I've all seen them in other applicants who became truly amazing heroes, and even if young Midoriya plans to become an evil hero, is that truly a bad thing? I can count multiple times where had it not been for an evil hero countless lives would have been lost. At this the other teachers nodded, having experienced the same thing. So, let's give this young man a chance and see what he has to offer. Nizu offered and the other heroes nodded, finally convinced. And the other applicants? The R-rated hero Midnight asked. Let's let them try again. Vlad King, the BLD hero and homeroom teacher, spoke up. But only for the B course. Aizawa may not want them, but I'm willing to give them a chance. He offered, and after thinking it over Nizu agreed. Now there's only one thing left to test young Midoriya on. Nizu spoke as he flipped a glass panel and pressed the button it was guarding. The 0-pointer, are you sure we need it here? True, the kid is strong, but he has to be running out of tricks by now. Snipe said as he and switched back over to Midoriya and his, along with every other's eyes widen at what they saw. Or not. Snipe said as Nizu started laughing again. These next few years were going to be amazing, and it was all thanks to Izuku Midoriya. Line break. Izuku felt his grin grow every time a robot was destroyed thanks to his Gate of Babylon. Izuku, believe it or not, had created everything single one of those weapons thanks to another ability called idea creation. This ability allowed him to create any non-organic thing he could image, and over the last 10 years Izuku has created thousands if not millions of different things. After seeing the last of the robots fall, Izuku sighed to himself as he dismissed the gate. Present Mike had just declared there was 2 minutes left, but Izuku knew it was over. He had destroyed every last robot. He was about to head for the exit, and when the ground started shaking and a loud noise came from behind, and when his eyes found the cause, he could only think, now that's a showstopper, as he looked up at the 0-pointer. Izuku's mind surged as he tried to come up with the best to fight the enemy before an idea came to him. "This one's for you, All Might," he thought as he brought his fist up before punching forward with such speed and power a shockwave of air launched forward, tearing the robot apart. "And that's how you end a performance," Izuku thought to himself as Present Mike declared time was up, and Izuku made his way back to the entrance only to meet with a wall of angry yelling when he brought the crystal wall down, the most prominent being Tenya Ida. I knew you were trouble from the moment I saw you. Just you wait until you're disqualified for what was clearly a villainous and cowardly act." He threatened only to be confused when Izuku started chuckled. "Oh, but my friend, if they were going to disqualify me or had a problem with what I did, they would have said something already." No, I'm afraid the one's out of luck, are you?" "It's that right?" he asked, directing the last bit to Aizawa, who he noticed walking up. The pro nodded, confirming his words. "That's right, everything you did was deemed fair and within the rules," he said before turning to the rest of the applicants. "As for the rest of you, we're letting you retake the test, however it will be only for the B class." This naturally got cries of outrage from the applicants, which were quickly silenced by Aizawa's glare. "Be quiet, we don't even have to do this. The only reason we are is because the principal felt sorry for you, however I can easily cancel it if you want to complain." At this no one spoke. "That's what I thought, now head over to the westmost gym and wait for the test," Aizawa instructed before facing Izuku. "As for you, you'll get your results in a few days," Aizawa said, simply following the applicants. Izuku stood there alone for a second before letting out a small laugh as he went to go find Cherry and Katsuki, eager to see if they had just as much fun as he did. Line break. It had been a few days since the test, and now the three were waiting on the results. Naturally, after telling Katsuki, Cherry, and later Angel, they all roared with laughter as Izuku explained exactly what he had done. Cherry went on to explain her test was pretty normal and she was happy for all the things she got to destroy. Bakugo's test, however, was a mix between an obstacle course and defeating basic enemies. Katsuki explained that while the test was hard since he finished in the top 5, he was too worried. Izuku was knocked out of his thoughts when his mother burst through the door with his exam results. With a smile and a thank you, he took the results into his room. "I am here as a projection," All Might announced as Izuku's eyes widened at seeing the number 1 hero. "Greetings, it is I, All Might, and I'm here to present you your test results, Izuku Midoriya." "Why, you ask? Because I'll be one of your new teachers," All Might informed as he flexed, and Izuku's eyes widened even further. "Now then, on to the results. Needless to say, you were a first. Raising a barrier so one else could enter wasn't very heroic, and it prevented you from getting any rescue points, which are points you get for saving other participants. However, because there was no roll against it, we couldn't penalize you for it." All Might laughed, "And when it comes to villain points which you got for destroying robots, you truly went plus ultra and ended with 300 points. More than enough to secure your place at UA and as the first-year representative. So with that, I say congratulations, young Midoriya, and welcome to your Hero Academia." With that, the projection was cut off and Izuku left there alone and in silence until he started chuckling lightly. "Oh yes," he continued to laugh. "This is going to be very entertaining. Well, we're finally here," Izuku said as he, Cherry and Katsuki stood in front of UA in their new uniforms. Katsuki smirked as he punched the palm of his right hand. "Hell yeah, we are. It's time to show this school what real heroes are," he said, eager to get started even if he's only in the B course. "If you boys are just about finished, I say we get moving. Don't want to be late on the first day now, do we?" Cherry asked sarcastically, but the two could tell she was excited as they were, so they quickly headed inside. In no time at all, Izuku and Cherry were standing in front of the Class 1A door. "Well then, shall we, my dear?" Izuku asked Cherry, who nodded rapidly as he turned the handle and stepped into the room. "You're here. A voice cried and suddenly Izuku was found engulfed in a hug. This caused Izuku to twitch. He didn't like being suddenly touched. Though given who it is, it's to be expected. He thought. Hello Inasa. He told the boy as he looked into his friend's beaming face. Inasa Yurashi had been a friend of Izuku's for years, the two having met at the Quirk training center and immediately hit it off due to their cheerful natures. Inasa is very tall and well-built young man with buzzed dark brown hair and black eyes. Inasa grinned further as he put Izuku down. I knew you were going to show up, I just knew it. Inasa said as before he turned to an already seating student. Isn't that right Hitoshi? He asked getting a sigh from the now named Hitoshi. Hitoshi is a young man with messy, indigo hair that flares out in large tufts around his head and notably sharp teeth. His eyes are dark purple with white pupils and are thin and somewhat triangular in shape, with no visible eyelashes. They're usually half closed and he has very dark eye bags underneath them. This was Hitoshi Shinso, another friend of Izuku and in Shinso's own words, the sensible one of the group. Out of the three of them Shinso was the most grounded. Said purple-haired boy was heading over to them. Considering the fact he texted us and said he got in I would hope so. Shinso said in his normal dry tone. I know. Inasa yelled, either not noticing or caring about the tone. And to think I was considering transferring to Shiketsu High. Good thing I got your message. Inasa revealed shocking the trio as Cherry and Hitoshi's eyes widened shocked and while Izuku titled his head in confusion the radio static usually accompanying him going silent. Shiketsu. Dude, you've been talking about UA for years. What the hell could make you consider changing schools? Cherry demanded and even though she wasn't as close to him as well as other two were, she knew how much this school meant to him. I must admit I'm curious as well my friend. This isn't a decision to make so easily. Izuku told him his voice rarely normal as he looked toward his large boy. Inasa was silent for a moment an unusual stoic look on his face. Let's just say, he said as he looked toward the back of the room and his face morphed into a glare. I have my reasons. Meanwhile the other three were completely lost however they noticed it was nearly time for class to start so they headed to open desk. 2 minutes later the bell rang as the door opened and in came a giant yellow caterpillar with a man's face. You're all sitting down and quite, good that's reassuring. The MSN said as the man unzipped his sleeping bag and stepped out. I'm Shoyuta Aizawa, and I'm your homeroom teacher. He introduced himself as he looked around his class. So welcome to the Advanced Hero course here at UA. You've been placed here because you were judged to be ready for this kind of training. Aizawa informed as the class held on to his every word. However, Aizawa said suddenly as his face morphed into a glare. If I or any of your teachers think you're slipping and not taking this seriously, we can transfer you to the B course or out of the hero department altogether. You've earned your spots here, now you've got to prove you deserve to keep it. Aizawa finished his warning leaving many in the class unnerved. With that being said, Aizawa continued with a sigh. First thing is introducing yourselves to the class. Your names, quirks, interest that kind of thing. He explained before turning to Inasa who was at the front of the room. You first, he said to Inasa who was sitting in the first desk in the row closest to the door. The boy in question shot out of his desk in an instant. Yes sir. My name is Inasa Yurashi and my quirk is Whirlwind. It allows me to summon and manipulate powerful guests of wind. My interests include heroes and passions. He finished with a shout causing many to stare at him strangely while the three who knew him just chuckled. As Inasa sat down the girl who sat behind him got up. She was around 6 feet 0 inches tall and more muscular than Avenged girls. She had green eyes and wore light green eyeshadow around the upper corner of eyes. She had red hair in a waist-length ponytail curled slightly into a ringlet. Hello, my name is Pira Nikos. The now named Pira introduced herself with a bow. My quirk is polarity which allows me to command the force of magnetism. My hobbies include training and making new friends. I hope we all get along. She finished seating down, getting smiles from more of the social members of the class which she returned. Guess I'm next. The girl behind Pira muttered while standing. She was a short girl of a relatively slender build compared to her classmates, who has notably large hands. Her appearance was rather frog-like. She has a very wide mouth, which dips down a little in the middle just like that of a common frog, and oval-shaped eyes with large, black irises, their lower eyelashes visibly pronounced. Her hair is a dark sea-green color, and is very long, reaching all the way to her waist, the ends tied together at the bottom in a bow of hair. She has 2 shoulder-length clumps framing her face, and shorter bangs between her eyes, some of them partially swept to each side. My name is Tsuyu Azui, but you all can just call me Tsu. Tsuyu told her classmates. My quirk is called Frog, it's pretty self-explanatory. My likes include my little siblings, Jelly and the rainy seasons. The frog-like girl said before taking her seat, prompting causing some to blink at the sudden end and causing the next student to go. He was one of the shortest in the whole class, just little taller than Tsuyu. He had bright yellow hair tied into a ponytail that reached the bottom of his neck along golden eyes that. With a smile the boy stood with a proud smile on his face. My name is Edward Elric, and it's great to be here. My quirk is called alchemy, which allows me to turn anything into anything else of equal value. As for things I like, well, there's my family and sparing. He said with gleam in his eye. This caused the boy behind him to jump out of his seat. He's a muscular young man of average height, with a rather impressive physique, despite his young age. He has red eyes that are pointed slightly inwards, and a small scar just above his right eye. He also has small eyebrows and very pointed teeth. His hair is reasonably short, dyed a bright red, and spiked away from his head at all angles with gel, 2 more pronounced tufts spiked on either side of his forehead like little horns. That's what I love to see, all that manliness in such a small package. The boy said, excitement clear in his voice. What he wasn't expecting was for Edward to grab him by his jacket and pull him close, a look of rage on his face. What the hell did you say about me, you JRK? The blonde demanded, with the redhead trying to clear up any misunderstandings when they both felt a chill go up their spines, and slowly they turned to see their teacher glaring at them, his hair levitating and his eyes glowing a deep red. Slowly and silently Edward released his hold and sank back into his chair, ignoring the small laughter he heard from the other side of the room. Seeing this, Aizawa's hair fell and the glare lessened as he glanced at the redhead, who was frozen stiff. Go. The teacher ordered simply, with the boy nodding nervously. Why, yes sir. He stammered before breathing in and out as a smile came to his face. Hey everyone, my name's Eijiro Kirishima and my quirk is called hardening. This gives me the power to harden and sharpen any or all pieces of my body and causes my body to become jagged and rock-like. My likes include meat, manliness, and mainly heroes like my favorite hero Crimson Riot, who I'm sworn to not only be like but also surpass. He finished, getting impressed looks from the class, with Izuku himself giving the boy a standing ovation. Bravo! Bravo! The passion, the drive. He cheered, his voice sounding even more enthusiastic throughout the static, though the class was somewhat surprised to hear disembodied cheering somewhere seemingly just out of sight. Enough. Aizawa's glare was back again as he glared at Izuku, who to his confusion didn't seem to mind, as he just seemed to sit down while flashing a thumbs up towards Kirishima, who blushed and rubbed the back on his neck sheepishly, a small smile on his face from the praise as he sat down, and the girl leading the next row stood up. She had teal hair and long ginger hair that she wore tied into a ponytail on the left side of her head. Her bangs were split into 3 clumps around her eyes, and some of her hair sticked up in tufts on the top of her head. Hi, my name is Itsuka Kendo. My quirk is called Big Fist. Kendo started revealing her name and her quirk. Like Azui's, it's pretty self-explanatory. As for likes, well, that includes black coffee and motorcycles. At this reveal many of class couldn't help the look of surprise show on their faces, with Kendo laughing as she saw this. Yeah, I know, strange, but I like what I like. she said, sitting down only for Tsuyu to lean over to her. I told you guys to call me Tsu. The frog girl told her, getting sheepish nod and smile from Kendo. Looks like I'm up then. The girl behind Kendo stood with a smile. She is a slim young woman of below average height. She has long, white hair which curls slightly at the ends, with two bangs framing her face and reaching down to her chest. Her hairstyle's most distinctive trait is a short, upward ponytail obtained by gathering and tying the hair covering her forehead. She has large blue eyes and a curvy, voluptuous body. Hello everyone, my name is Mira Jane Strauss. She greeted with her eyes closed and a wave, as many of the boys could already feel a crush forming. My quirk, which I actually share between with my mother and siblings, is called transformation. With it we can each transform parts of our body or the whole thing. Mine happen to be demons. At this, many people in the class perked up in interest, especially Izuku. As for my likes, well, there's my family, cooking, and I am thinking about doing some part-time modeling, to get more experience. With that and one last smile, she sat down, allowing the next student to go. Next up was a tall, muscular young man with pale gray hair, swept forwards, that covers most of his face, bent downwards at almost a right angle over his eye. He has 6 arms, all attached to each other by a web of skin, which are very physically strong. Greetings, my name is Mizo Shojin, my quirk is dupli arms, he introduced himself before looking down at the tentacles. It not only gives me these tentacles but allows me to transfer them into depilates of different part of my body, which actually works better than the originals, ironically. He said with a chuckle, getting small chuckles in return. As for my likes, well, I'm pretty simple actually, so I like things simple, though my favorite foods are takoyaki and squid ink pizza. Mizo finished before sitting down. Well, it appears it is my turn. The girl behind the multi-armed student said, standing up. She's a rather pale girl of reasonable height, with thin, somewhat cat-like eyes with thick upper eyelashes, a couple of longer and more pronounced ones poking out to each far side. Their iris is a bluish lilac color. Her hair is very straight and reaches down to her waist, with 2 ear-length clumps and a neat fringe framing her face in a princess cut, its color somewhere between baby blue, lavender, and pale gray. She also wore a golden monocle over her left eye. Greetings everyone, my name is Psycho Intelli. She introduced herself with a bow. My quirk is IQ, it allows me to increase by drinking teas, with certain teas increasing certain knowledge more so. I've also found that if I drink it cold the effects are more than doubled. As for likes, well, teas obviously, but I also have a liking towards strategic games, such as chess and shogi. I hope we all get along. She finished setting down. I'm up. A girl shot out of her seat. The girl was of medium height, possibly set a little more broadly than some of her other female classmates, with healthy thighs. Her skin is a light shade of pink, and she has rather square eyes, with black sclera and light yellow irises, and notably long eyelashes below and around the sides. Her face is framed by short hair, fluffy and unruly, which is a pleasant pink color, slightly darker than that of her skin. She has 2 thin, pale yellow horns protruding from her head, hooked squarely and leaning diagonally to opposite sides. Hey everyone, name's Mina Ashido, and it's great to be here. Mina induced herself with a cheer as a wave of energy seemed to wash over the class. My quirk's called acid, and it lets me produce a corrosive liquid from my body and also lets me control the solubility and viscosity. Though there is a limit to how much I can produce before my skin loses its natural resistance to it. She admitted before striking a pose. As for my likes, my absolute favorite thing is dancing. Loved it since I was a kid. As well as alien horror movies. So come on everyone, let's make this class the best one yet and kick the butt of anyone who gets in our way. She fined with a cheer before sitting down. Leaning back in her chair, Cherry whispered to Izuku. Oh, I like her. The girl whispered with Izuku nodding rapidly, a crazy grin on his face. It was on to the 3rd row, and with Hitoshi being at the front of it, so with a tired sigh he stood up. Name's Hitoshi Shinso, and my quirk is called brainwashing. Shinso said and mentally rolled his eyes when he saw the same old surprise and in slight fear on a few of his classmates' face, though he was surprised how few actually had the look. It allows me to put anyone I wish under my command as long as they verbally respond to me, he revealed. As for things I like, well, I like cats and I enjoy bicycling. He finished with a shrug, allowing the next person to go. The next student was a young girl of average height who has surprisingly large, upturned dusky green eyes with long lower eyelashes, and notably long and pointed teeth. Her hair is a dark moss green, collectively reaching just below her shoulders aside from a short clump that hangs in the center of her forehead, and it grows wavier and thinner the lower down it gets. Hey everyone, name's Setsuna Tokage, and my quirk is Lizard Tail Splitter. It allows her to split up her body into as many as 50 pieces. Each and every one of these split pieces are able to levitate and move freely through the air. The pieces can also regenerate if they are destroyed or otherwise unusable. As for likes, well, I absolutely love dinosaurs, she said with a grin before sitting down. Next up was a girl of medium height and mid-length black hair with a single left-swept red highlight on her bangs. Her blue eyes have peculiar gear-shaped pupils with 8 grooves around the edges. Sup, name's Ryuko Matoi. Ryuko introduced herself lazily as she raised her hand in lazy wave. My quirk is called Slash. It allows me to generate blades made out of some kind of energy over my body, and as I fight the blades are able to adapt to my opponent's skills and lets me adapt to them, Ryuko said with a shrug. As for my likes, well, there's my sister and my best friend Mako. She finished lamely before a grin appeared on her face. But if there's one thing I really like, it's getting into a good scrap with actual competent brawlers, she revealed, and taking note as she sat down of several now interested eyes on her. Next up was a boy with short, straight, black hair and dark eyes which contrasted with his translucent white skin. Greetings everyone, my name is Sai Shimura, and my quirk is called Living Art, and it allows me to bring anything I draw to life. As for my likes, they include drawing, my brother, and making new friends. I hope we all get along, he said, all with a smile on his face before setting down. Ending out the row was a reasonably tall, rather muscular young man who is well built for his age. He has quite long hair, though it doesn't pass his neck, and wears bangs, parted twice as to not obscure his vision. His hair is evenly split between 2 colors, white on his right side and crimson red on his left. Possesses his left eye's iris is turquoise, while his right is a somewhat brownish dark gray. His eyes, in shape, are quite thin and reserved, and he also has a large burn scar on the left side of his face, which reaches from his hairline to halfway down his cheek. With a blank face the boy stood up. My name is Shoto Todoroki and my quirk is half cold half hot, allowing me to generate ice from the right side of my body and fire from the left side. Don't get in my way, he finished with a warning. Geez, what crawled up his butt and died? Cherry whispered to Izuku, who merely smirked with a raised eyebrow. Well, every party needs a pooper, that's why they invented him, Izuku whispered back with a smirk before glancing over to see Inesa glaring murderously at the boy. Inesa seems to agree. Finally the introductions had reached the final row with the boy in front standing up. He is a short young man with the head of a black bird, possibly supposed to resemble that of a crow or a raven. He has a tan, yellowish beak which is slightly hooked down at the end, thin, red eyes with a small black pupil, one on each side of his head, and a red choker, which he rarely removes. Despite the appearance of his head, however, his body is of normal human shape, with rather fair skin. Greetings my fellow disciples, my name is Fumikage Tokoyami and my quirk is Dark Shadow. As Fumikage said this, a large shadow like being merged with yellow shining eyes. Seeing the stupefied looks on most of the glass, the shadow creature laughed. That right, take it all in folks, this is what true greatness looks like. It spoke, surprising many in the room as retreated back into Fumikage. Apologies about him, he is difficult to control at times. Moving on, my likes include gloomy places and my favorite food is apples. I look forward to training with you all, he said before sitting down, causing Cherry to laugh. He would get along great with you and Angel, she said standing up as it was her turn. Hey everyone, how's it going? Name's Cherry Bomb, and my quirk's called Cherry Bombs, lets me create various kind of bombs in the form of cherries. Anyway, my likes enjoy music, parties, and hanging out people I can actually stand. Here's to a great year and hopefully no one biting it. The explosive user finished with a grin, eager to see what comes next. Seeing it was finally his turn, Izuku slowly and calmly got out of his feet, with a few people actually eager to hear what he has to say, considering what he said earlier with Kirishima. Which is why it confused them when he stood there calmly not saying a word, just looking around as if he was trying to take everything in. Mina opened her mouth to ask what was wrong when Izuku finally spoke. Hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya and it's a pleasure to meet you all, truly a pleasure. He said, his radio voice going on full effect, with the class jumping back in surprise as they each found a portal on their desk with Izuku's arm sticking out of it. Everyone turned to see Izuku standing there, his right arm sticking through a portal, a wide grin on his face as he eagerly looked around to see who would shake his hand. He wasn't disappointed, as most of the class shook it either hesitantly like the two behind him or enthusiastically like Kirishima, Mira-Jane, and Mina. Even his old friends did something with Inasa and Shinso shaking it, though Inasa did it much more enthusiastically than Shinso, while Cherry went in for a fist pump. The only one that didn't do anything was Todoroki, who other than briefly raise an eyebrow ignored the appendage in front of him. Not that Izuku seemed to mind. Wow dude, you can make portals. That's awesome. Setsuna told him, with the more enthusiastic members of the class and even some of the more reverse members nodding, only for them to grow confused when Izuku shook his head with a chuckle. Oh, no, my friends. My quirk is not portals, my quirk is called transcendent demonic undead physiology. A mouthful, I know, but it gives me astronomically heightened physical abilities and a near limitless amount of energy I'm just calling magic. Izuku said, laughing at the stunned looks on everyone's face as he continued. Anyway, my likes involve fighting, my mother, cooking, entertainment, and a variety of other things, and looking around I can just tell this is going to be very entertaining. He finished before taking a seat, with the student behind him needing a moment before they started their introduction. It was young, slim, large-busted woman, with long, straight black hair that falls to the middle of her back. It is cut in the traditional Japanese, princess style. Greetings, my name is Kagura Mikazuchi and my quirk is called Gravity Change, allowing me to alter the gravity on anything or anyone. My likes include practicing with the sword and quirk as well as my brother. She spoke very calmly, not really showing any emotion, before calmly sitting back down as the last of the class stood. Good morning everyone, my name is Momo Yaoyorozu. Momo is a fairly tall teenage girl with a rather mature physique, considering her age. She has long black hair that is normally tied into a spiky ponytail, with a large strand hanging on the right side of her face and onyx eyes that point slightly inwards, which seems to resemble a cat. My quirk is called Creation. It allows me to create any non-living thing from the lipids of my body, though I have to have a good undemanding of molecular structure of what I'm creating to make it work though. I hope we all get along. Seeing that the introductions were done, the class turned to face their teacher to see what was next, only for many to sweat drop when they found the man asleep. Not knowing what to do, Pira slowly got out of her seat and went over to Aizawa. Sir. She muttered, shaking him slightly, getting a grunt from the man as he slowly opened his eyes, something that caused Pira to continue. We're done introducing ourselves, and we're wondering what to do next. She explained, causing the man to grunt as he looked at the clock. You got through them faster than I thought you would. He muttered before standing up and unzipping his sleeping bag. Alright, everyone head to the changing rooms and put on the gym clothes you were given. He instructed as he stepped out of his yellow cocoon and headed for the door. After that, head for the exercise field out back. He said, reaching the door. It's time for you all to have your first test. Line break. So can you actually move them? Mina asked Izuku as they and the rest of the class, having changed into the PE clothes and were heading towards the grounds where Aizawa told them to meet him. Izuku answered at her question with laugh. Of course I can, my dear, watch. He said as a drum roll sound effect was heard before it ended, as the tiny deer antlers on the top of his head shook slightly, much to Mina's and those watching amusement. That's so cool. I've tried to do that with mine for years, but they won't budge. Think you could help me?" she asked, hopefully wanting to learn what she saw as an awesome party trick. "Of course, Ms. Ashido, by the time I'm done they'll be just as flexible as the rest of you," Izuku promised, smirking at the blush he saw from the bad innuendo. It was at that point the class had arrived with Aizawa there waiting for them. "Now that you're all here we can begin," he stated, but before he could continue Kendo raised her hand. "Excuse me sir, but what about the orientation ceremony?" she asked, getting nods and murmurs from the rest with the rest of the class, with Aizawa nodding, even bothering to hide his eye roll. "Every year," he thought. "Time is short kids, we only have 3 years to train you the best we can. You're the A class, the supposed elite. You can't afford to be wasting time with pointless things like orientation," the underground hero told them before getting out a baseball from his pocket. "Now then, you're going to go through 8 tests to see where you stand," he instructed before narrowing his eyes. "Keep in mind that if I find your results less satisfactory or I believe you aren't giving it your all, then I will send you to Class B, if not out of the hero course altogether," he warned, with most of the class feeling a shiver go up their spine. Even those like Momo, Shoto and Setsuna who got in through recommendation knew they weren't safe from being kicked out of the class. "With that being said," Aizawa said, tossing the ball to Izuku, who caught it with a raised eyebrow and an amused smirk. "Midoriya, while you came in first at the entrance exam, your action cost over 100 applicants the chance to get into this class," Aizawa revealed, causing many in the class to widen their eyes, having heard rumors about that, and for Cherry to laugh at the reminder. Aizawa ignored the muttering from his class and kept his eyes squarely on Izuku. "The tracker on that ball will measure the distance you achieve when you toss it," Aizawa said before gesturing towards the circle. "You'll toss it from that circle. You can do anything you want as long as you stay in the circle," Aizawa informed before narrowing his eyes as he watched calmly walk towards the circle. "Now then, Midoriya, show me if it was a mistake or not choosing you over all those other appellants," Aizawa said as Izuku entered the circle. Izuku looked around calmly, his eyes drifting from location to location, briefly spotting Cherry talking with the other students, no doubt trying to get information out of her about what happened during the exam, before facing Aizawa, who was waiting and watching, a look of expectation on his face. "Just so we're clear, I can do anything as long as I stay in the circle?" he questioned, getting a nod from his teacher. "And what we're trying to get is the furthest distance possible, right?" Again he got another nod. "Perfect," Izuku said simply, his left index finger glowing a dark green as he proceeded to draw a circle in the air. By now the rest of the class were paying very close attention to what Izuku was doing, especially after seeing the circle glow for a second before something appeared inside out it, and when the class saw it they couldn't help but grow confused. "Is that the moon?" Kirishima asked, trying to understand what he was seeing. Izuku spared a single glance towards his new classmate. "Why, yes it is," before turning back and casually threw the ball through the circle where it could be seen floating in space. A beeping from Aizawa direction got their attention, where Aizawa showed the glass the results. Unknown was what was seen on the tiny screen. "Well, sir, is that acceptable, or do you need an actual number?" Izuku questioned, a small, arrogant smile forming on his face. "It's acceptable," Aizawa said, not even blinking at his students' arrogance, having dealt with students far worse in the past. With that he turned to the rest of the class as Izuku rejoined the group. "Alright, who's next?" the tired-looking teacher asked, with Inasa instantly stepped forward. "I am, sir," he shouted while running to the circle. "I'm ready to prove that I do belong here, and that I dash." "Just get on with it," Aizawa interrupted, having dealt with Inasa's type as well. The wind controller snapped to a salute. "Yes sir," before getting into a standard thrower's stance, wind whirling around him. Plus, he started winding up his throw. "Ultra," he finished with a shout before launching the ball. The force increased greatly because of the wind. A ping from Aizawa's phone alerted them to the score coming in, which Aizawa reveled. 46 meters. Upon seeing his score, Inesa let out a cheer while Aizawa faced the rest of the class. Next. Cherry went next, a wide grin on her face as she stepped into the circle while throwing the ball idly. Whenever you're ready. Aizawa instructed, with the rest of the class watched in anticipation. Having seen how she seemed to know both the first two throwers, they wanted to see if she could get a similar score. Cherry just grinned seeing this before three of her bombs appeared in her hand, which she proceeded to place on the ball, which much to the class's surprise stuck to it. Without any further ado, Cherry threw the ball with all her might, this time it being a normal throw, with the ball landing about 90 meters away, with the class confused and disappointed that the throw was so ordinary and the bombs appeared to be duds. They never noticed Cherry's or her friends' smirks of anticipation. Boom! The rest of the class's eyes widened as an explosion blasted into existence from where the ball had landed, sending the ball flying again, this time with much greater force, with it flying off into the distance. Mina couldn't keep it in anymore, seeing the three great performances being too much for her. That was amazing bomb. Sorry for dash. She was cut off when Cherry made a quite shushing sound, and before anyone could say anything another explosion was heard in the distance, causing the students to gasp in realization before looking towards Aizawa, who checked his phone to see that the number of was still going up. Finally, after another few seconds and after what some students guessed was a third explosion, Aizawa looked up and showed them Cherry's score, 57 meters. The class gasped at the score while Cherry's grin just got bigger. Like that. Call that my sticky cherries. She said, her one eye shining with glee. At the chance to show off. I believe I'll go next. Sai said, smile still in place as he walked up to the circle. When he got the nod from Aizawa, however, he didn't pick up a ball, instead he got out a blank scroll and brush and began to sketch something, and in seconds he was done with a fully drawn and appealing bird emerged from the scroll. Please take this far away and drop it. Sai instructed, picking up the ball and handing it to the bird, who caught in response, taking the ball in its claws before flying away. A beeping occurred signaling that the bird had indeed dropped the ball, and Aizawa revealed the score to be 44 meters. Sai continued to smile. A bit disappointing, but it's acceptable for now. He said, ignoring the looks he was getting from his disappointing comment. Kagura was up next, and her method was simple. She changed the gravity on the ball until it was almost non-existent before throwing it. To her disappointment, her score was 76 meters, making her click her teeth, having wanted to at least clear. Edward was next, and with a smile he clasped his hands together before placing them on the ground, electricity flowing off him and onto the ground, where it shifted into the form of a small cannon. Edward simply chucked the ball into the cannon before firing it, with the end result being the ball and landing a distance of 21 meters away. Pira went next and used the tracker in the ball to manipulate it and send it flying, though she was disappointed when her score only came to 80 meters away. My range still needs work. She thought with a mental sigh as she walked back to the group. Shinso stood in the circle next and was thinking about how to do this before looking over and towards the class, where his eyes widened as an idea came to him. That'll work. He thought with a smirk. Hey Inesa. He called out, getting an immediate response from the larger boy. Yeah, Hitoshi, what do you? Inesa trailed off as his body went stiff. Hitoshi, seeming this, nodded. Right, come here and throw this ball while using your quirk. The purple-haired teen ordered, with Inesa walking over stiffly and taking the ball. Wasting no time, wind covered Inesa's arm before he threw it, the wind blowing it further. When the beeping occurred, Aizawa showed the class the brainwasher's score, 6 meters. Hitoshi nodded, satisfied with the score, was about to step out of the circle when Momo raised her hand. Excuse me, sir, but can that really be allowed? This was meant to test our own abilities. Shinso just used someone else's. I don't believe that's fair to us or Yarashi himself for Hitoshi to be given credit for something he didn't do. Momo spoke, with the more honorable people like Kirishima and Pira nodding in agreement. Shinso clicked his teeth in annoyance and was about to retort when someone did it for him. Are you really that naive, Yaoyorozu? Kagura asked with a raised eyebrow and her arms crossed, with Momo being taken back from the question. What? She asked, with Saiko answering this time. She asked if you were really that naive. A question I want answered as well. The tea lover clarified. I'm not. Momo stammered before glaring at the two girls who continued to look unimpressed. Where did you get the right to ask me something like that? Momo demanded, not being used to anyone speaking to her like that. The same place you got the right to question Shinso when he followed the rules Mr. Aizawa set up. Kagura shot back with Saiko nodding in agreement. Indeed, all Mr. Aizawa said was that we had to stay in the circle. Shinso did that, so he broke no rules. Saiko told her before turning to their teacher. Isn't that right, sir? She asked with Aizawa nodding after a moment. Kagura seeing this turned back to Momo, as you can see Yaoyorozu, there isn't a problem, so next time why don't you just keep your opinion to yourself and let the teacher do his job? Kagura suggested coldly before turning away with Saiko doing the same. As they did so, Momo was left there mortified at what just happened. It didn't help that she could see several of her classmates were watching her either in amusement or pity before she turned her attention to Saiko and Kagura who were watching Mina throw. Those two. She thought as she passed Mina who wasn't able to use her quirk and just gave a normal ball through resulting in a mere 4 meters. I'll show them. She thought as she prepared to create a cannon and launch the ball well into the horizon and completely outshine Kagura's score. But what about the other tests? A tiny voice in the back of her head causing Momo's eyes to widen. That's right. She thought, and luckily she was able to stop the creation before any lipids could be lost. I can't believe I almost made such a mistake. She thought before shaking her head. Come on Momo, focus. She thought before taking a deep breath. Alright, let's do it. She thought, activating her quirk, and the class was surprised when she created a t-shirt cannon. A cannon or even a missile launcher would be much more effective. I can't waste so many lipids so quickly. She thought as she loaded the ball into the launcher and fired it into the air. With the end results being a distance of 43 meters. Seeing the score, Momo let out a sigh of disappointment as she passed Mira Jane. At least I didn't waste any lipids, she thought, and would have continued to walk back to the class had a hand holding an apple not appeared in front of her. Surprised, she looked up and saw Izuku smiling down at her. For you, my dear. He said, smile as wide as ever while gesturing to the apple. Momo blinked before slowly picking up the apple. Thank you. But why? She questioned with Izuku letting out a laugh with a laugh track going off around them. Why isn't it obvious? I did it as a reward. Izuku told her, confusing her more since aside from Mina her throw was the lowest one yet. The confusion must have shown on her face as Izuku let out another laugh. Not for the throw, Ms. Yaoyorozu, no, you're getting this little treat for not giving into your rage. At this, Momo eyes widened as Izuku began to circle her. Oh yes, I saw the look on your face. You wanted to lash out, to prove you were better, and given your quirk that would have been pretty easy. He said before his smile turned complete demonic, his teeth growing huge and even sharper and his eyes shining bright red. But I'm guessing that would have cost you big. He said, his voice completely normal for the first time since Momo has met him. The sudden change caught her completely, with her only being able to nod. In an instant Izuku was back to normal. And that, my dear, is why you deserve that. He said, his voice also back to its radio tone. So hold your head high, my dear, and show our classmates that the little spat you just had was simply a fluke. He said as he began walking back to the group before looking back at her one last time. And don't forget to smile, my dear. No one's ever fully dressed without one. With that he walked back their classmates humming a tune all the while. Momo watched him for a few seconds before looking down on at the apple in her hand before a smile slowly came to her face as she slowly took a bite as she walked back to join her classmates, congratulating Mira Jane, who had transformed her arm and had thrown her ball over 1,000 meters, all the while determined to do better in the upcoming events. After that the throws began much more standard, with some exceptions such as Mizo and Kendo, whose quirks gave their physical strength a boost, and Todoroki and Tokoyami, who used their quirks to launch the ball out of sight. As the last student finished, Aizawa looked down at the distance and nodded. Alright, let's move on, we got 7 more tests to get through, so let's go. he ordered, with the rest of the class nodding, eager to prove their worth in the upcoming test. 50-meter dash. This event proved to be much different from the first test, as those like Shinso, Ijiro, and Pira, whose quirk offered them no speed boost, scored rather average, while those like Mina were able to use their quirks to increase their speed. Cherry was one of the most interesting methods, as due to her immunity to her own explosion threw bombs down on the ground and simply rode the explosions to the finish line, beating Todoroki, who she was running against, by 2 seconds and causing the boy to grit his teeth in frustration. Izuku and Kagura were the last two to go. "You ready, Ms. Mikazuchi?" he asked the stoic girl, who glanced over at Izuku and gave a simple nod. "I will win this time," she said, making her body lighter with her quirk, while Izuku chuckled. "We'll see," was all he offered in return. Izuku Midoriya and Kagura Mikazuchi, 50-meter dash test, ready. The robot recording their time started as Kagura tensed and got into a running position, while Izuku merely crossed his arms behind his back. "Start," the robot announced. And the world stood still. Izuku looked around as time stood still and the color faded out of the area. Calmly and slowly Izuku strolled towards the finish line and was just about to cross the finish line before he stopped and glanced behind him towards Kagura. Before shrugging with a snap of his fingers, Kagura disappeared from the starting line and reappeared at the finish line. With nothing else to do, Izuku crossed the finish line, and with another snap of his fingers, time moved forward again and color returned to the world. Everyone from Kagura to the other students and even Aizawa blinked in confusion as the two heroes in training appeared at the finish line, while Cherry just smirked, having a good feeling of what happened. Test complete. Kagura Mikazuchi time 0:1 seconds. Izuku Midoriya time 0:1 seconds. Hearing his score, Izuku nodded and moved to prepare for the next test when he felt a hand on his shoulder, causing him to look and see Kagura looking at him with a confused glare. "Why?" was the only thing she said, with Izuku only shrugging. "Why not?" he asked in return as he moved with the class towards the next test. Grip test. This stands out here, where Kirishima, Mizo, Kendo, Kagura, Mirajane and Izuku, who all used their quirks to enhance their strength, density, and gravity to overpower the machine. Mirajane and Izuku actually tied, with both of them completely crushing the machine to scrap, causing Aizawa to sigh and facepalm. Standing long jump. This one was interesting, as thanks to their quirks, Edward, Todoroki, Tokoyami Kagura, Cherry, Izuku, Tsuyu, Inasa, Mirajane and Sai were all able to clear the sandbox through various means, like Ed transmuting the ground into a springboard, Cherry creating a bunch of bombs before jumping on them, sending her flying. Inasa used his wind to fly over the pit, while Todoroki rode his ice over. Tokoyami had Dark Shadow grab hold of the other side, letting the bird-headed student sail through the air and onto the other side. Mirajane grew demon wings on her back, while Sai created a large bird that he then rode over. Kagura and Tsuyu simply used their quirks to jump over, while Izuku merely teleported. Line break. The final four events were definitely more physical-based, such as the sit-up and toe-touch test. Still, the class was able to get through it with promising results, and as such were soon standing in front of Aizawa waiting for his verdict. After a moment of silence and reading over the results, he looked up at his students. "The results are acceptable, for now," Aizawa told his class, getting cheers and sighs of relief from his class. "You all made creative uses of your quirks, and those of you whose quirk didn't prove any help were still physically fit enough to have acceptable scores." Aizawa continued, getting grins from those like Saiko and Hitoshi, whose quirks were mental-based. "However, keep in mind what I said from the beginning. For here on out you'll be watched at all times, and if we think you're slipping, we will send you to where we think you belong. Got it?" he questioned with a final glare, getting a "yes sir" out of his students before giving a nod and turning to leave. "There will be syllabuses waiting for you when you get back to the classroom. Hurry up and get changed, you have 15 minutes. Aizawa told his class before leaving, with the class rushing off to do as their teacher instructed. Line. "Well, you clowns definitely sound like you had more fun today than I did," Bakugo told Izuku and Cherry as they walked home from UA. "Ha, those challenges were nothing special," Cherry dismissed before raising her eyebrow as she glanced at Bakugo. What about you? How's everyone in your class? The Cyclops asked with Bakugo shrugging. Fine for the most part, though there are some punks that I can tell are going to seriously bug me. He told them as a vein threatened to burst just by thinking about them. Izuku wrapped his arms around his two friends' shoulders. Well, whatever happens, I'm sure we can get through it. He encouraged his friend. After all, we are the best. He finished with a smirk that was soon matched by the other two. Izuku was right, of course. It didn't matter what they faced or how hard the training would get, they would get beat just like everything they faced. After all, Izuku said it himself. They were the best. To be continued.